Come sit down by the fire, let your night unwind. I'll spin you a web of tall tales, tangled in your mind. Is it real or just a fantasy? You'll never know the line. Come and hear my stories, you'll have a damn good time.
Through the fog, the forest yawns wide. Father, whisper, stay by my side. The rifle's cold, the air bites sharp. A moose cry echoes a dirge in the dark. Who's the hunter? Who's the prey? In the twilight rules decay. The antlers gleam, the shadows grow. Run, my son, we reap what we sow.
The Moose Hunt by JDStories. It was the kind of evening that made the world feel small and safe. The Harlan house in Elk River, Washington, was bursting with laughter and the smell of frosting. The kitchen was packed shoulder to shoulder, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, filling every inch of space. Somewhere in the noise, a radio played soft country music beneath the clinking of dishes and the rise and fall of voices. At the center of it all sat Eli Harlan, cheeks glowing from the heat of 15 candles flickering on a chocolate cake. His younger brother and sister crowded close on either side, giggling as they tried to sneak a fingerful of frosting. Eli's father, Wade, sat beside him, broad-shouldered, flannel-sleeved, his hand resting proudly on his son's shoulder, a man who smelled faintly of pine sap and sawdust, who had worked the forest long enough to wear the scent like a badge. "Make a wish," Wade said softly. Eli took a deep breath and blew. The flames vanished in a single gust, replaced by thin gray smoke curling upward like little gray ghosts. The room erupted in cheers and clapping. Someone shouted, 15 years old! Laura, his mother, snapped a picture, her smile bright, her eyes shining. The flash lit the room for an instant, catching laughter mid-motion. His cousins piled on the couch, his uncle raising a glass, his grandmother beaming with quiet pride. Then came the gifts, a compass, a camping stove, a new pair of boots, each one building on the last, forming a story only a few people in the room already knew. Finally, Wade's father, Grandpa Harlan, set a long, narrow box on the table. The noise quieted to a hush. Eli tore through the paper, and there it was, a rifle. Cherry wood stock, polished smooth as glass, silver plating that caught the light just so. A moose etched into the metal, his initials, E.H., carved neatly into the wood. Eli stared, wide-eyed. "She's yours, son," Wade said, voice thick with pride. Grandpa Harlan chuckled, leaning closer. "Same rifle I bought your old man when he turned 15. He ran a thumb along the barrel. "Guess we've started ourselves a family tradition." That brought a round of cheers and toasts. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed. The cousins swarmed around to see. For a moment, everything in the Harlan house felt golden. Laughter, love, legacy, all bound together in the glow of 15 tiny flames, now melting down to nothing. Laura stood back, hands clasped around her camera. She smiled, but there was a tenderness behind her eyes that no one else noticed. She saw her little boy, the same one who once built blanket forts and hid behind her knees when strangers came to the door. Somewhere between those moments and now, he'd become someone new. Someone taller, stronger, outgrowing her protection a little more each year. She blinked, swallowed the thought, and smiled again. Wade clapped his hands once, drawing the room's attention. 2 weeks from now, he said, Eli and I are heading north. British Columbia, moose country, his first big game hunt. Eli's face lit up. Really? Really, Wade said, grinning. Just the two of us, father and son. The crowd cheered again. Grandpa raised his glass high. To the hunt! The toast echoed around the room. To the hunt! And the Harlan house rang with laughter once more. Outside, the porch lanterns flickered low, their glow stretching across the yard in thin amber streaks. The evening wind moved through the cedars along the river, whispering through the dark like a voice too soft to understand. And if you stood there long enough, listening past the laughter spilling through the windows, you might have sworn you heard something else, something deeper than the wind, perhaps a breath, or even a warning. The morning air in Elk River, Washington, carried that early autumn bite that wakes a man right to his bones. The porch boards creaked under Wade Harlan's boots as he hauled another crate toward the truck. Coolers, canvas duffels, rolled sleeping bags, boxes of dry goods stacked neatly in the back. Eli darted in and out of the house, his voice bright, spilling with excitement. Dad, I packed extra batteries, and the camp stove fuel. Good thinking, Wade said, sliding the cooler tight against the tailgate. He checked the straps, tugged them twice. Always pack for one more day than you think you'll need. The sun had barely cleared the trees, turning the dew on the grass to sparks of light. Inside, Laura moved quietly between the window and the coffee pot. She'd been up since before dawn, pretending to busy herself while she watched the preparations. When she finally came to the door, mug in hand, her smile was steady, but her eyes were soft. You two sure you've got everything? She asked. Wade wiped his hand on his jeans. Food, fuel, first aid, 2 rifles, and 1 overexcited teenager. I'd say we're set. Eli laughed, slinging his backpack into the cab. You forgot. Best dad ever. Laura shook her head, smiling in spite of herself. She reached up, straightened Wade's collar, then kissed his cheek. You come back in one piece, she said quietly. Both of you. We will, Wade promised. For a moment they just stood there, the 3 of them framed in the golden light of the morning, the truck rumbling low in the driveway. Then Wade climbed behind the wheel. Eli slid in beside him, and the truck rolled slowly down the road, the tires crunching over gravel until the sound faded into the pines. The road north was long and beautiful. They crossed through Spokane by noon, the city shrinking behind them as the land opened up into endless ridges of forest and mountain. The farther they drove, the thinner the traffic became, until it was just the hum of the engine, the wind in the mirrors, and the distant call of ravens over the tree line. Eli watched the landscape change, dense pine giving way to alpine spruce, rivers twisting silver through valleys, road signs growing fewer and farther between. Each mile felt like a step backward in time. Wade told stories to fill the quiet, about his own first hunt, about camping trips with his father, about the sound of the forest before dawn when the mist hung low and the world felt brand new. You'll never forget that first morning, Wade said. That stillness, it gets in your blood. Eli nodded, grinning. I can't wait. They reached the Canadian border late that afternoon. The checkpoint sat like a quiet outpost between 2 walls of dark forest. 1 lane in each direction, a small wooden booth with a single light above it. The officer stepped out as Wade rolled down the window. Afternoon, he said, voice carrying that clipped northern accent. Where are you folks headed? Up toward the Cascaw Range, Wade said, handing over their passports. Father-son hunting trip. The officer looked over the documents, then peered into the back of the truck at the neatly stacked gear. He nodded slowly. Hunting trip, huh? Wade smiled. Family tradition. First time up here, though. The officer's expression shifted just slightly. That's nice, he said after a moment. Word of caution, though. The moose up here ain't like the moose in the lower 48. He handed the papers back, eyes lingering on Wade's face. Be careful out there. Wade gave a polite chuckle. We'll be fine. The officer's smile returned, but not all the way. He tipped his hat toward Eli. Have a good time, buddy. Thanks, sir, Eli said, beaming. The officer stepped back, and the gate lifted with a mechanical groan. As Wade eased the truck forward, Eli glanced out the window, watching the border post shrink behind them. "What did he mean by that?" the boy asked. Wade shrugged. "Probably just trying to sound mysterious," he smiled, keeping his eyes on the empty road ahead. "People up here like their tall tales." Eli nodded, though he found himself checking the darkening tree line as the last of the sun slipped behind the mountains. By the time they reached the Cascaw Range, the sky had turned gold and gray. Wade pulled off onto a gravel clearing beside a broad river that mirrored the fading light. "Right here," he said. "Perfect spot. We'll set up camp before dark." They worked together with practiced rhythm, unrolling the tent, stacking firewood, hanging a tarp line between two trees. The smell of pine needles and cold water filled the air. When the fire finally caught, crackling bright against the twilight, Eli leaned back on his heels and let out a long breath. "This is amazing," he said. Wade nodded, eyes on the horizon, where the last light burned behind the mountains. "It is. This is what it's all about. No phones, no noise, just the world as it's meant to be." They ate canned chili by the fire and talked until the stars came out, brilliant and cold above the tree line. Eli tilted his head back, gazing up at the sky. "You think we'll see any moose tomorrow?" Wade smiled. "If we're lucky. They like to move near dawn. We'll head upstream, first light." The boy nodded, satisfied. The fire popped, throwing tiny embers into the night. For a while, neither of them spoke. They just listened to the soft rush of the river, the whisper of the wind in the branches, the quiet heart of the wilderness all around them. And if either of them had noticed how still the forest had become, how even the crickets had fallen silent, they might have thought twice before calling it peace. Morning came to the Cascaw Range with a soft silver light. The fog clung low over the river, weaving through the cedars like breath from a sleeping giant. Somewhere in that mist, a loon cried, a sound so haunting it almost felt human. Wade was already up, crouched by the fire pit, stirring the ashes back to life. The smell of coffee drifted through the camp, bitter and comforting. Eli stepped out of the tent, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, his hair sticking up in wild angles. He breathed in the cold morning air and smiled. "Smells amazing," he said. Wade poured him a tin cup of coffee, half milk, half sugar, and nodded toward the river. "Keep your eyes open this morning. The moose like to come down early." They ate breakfast quietly. Instant oats, jerky, and the last of the cinnamon rolls Laura had packed. The fire crackled low, the mist rising in slow curls until the world brightened around them. By 7, the camp was packed up and the rifles were slung. Wade led the way along the riverbank, boots sinking slightly in the damp earth. The air was crisp and full of sound, the rush of water, the chatter of birds, the creak of branches waking in the breeze. For the first few hours, it was everything Wade had hoped to share with his son. A fox darted across their path, tail flaring like a torch before vanishing into the brush. A porcupine waddled up a fallen log, pausing long enough for Eli to whisper, "Whoa, I've never seen one that close before." "Keep your distance," Wade murmured with a grin. "They don't warn you twice." By midday, the fog had burned off completely, revealing a sky so blue it looked painted. They followed the river upstream where the rocks grew larger and the trees older, thick-trunked giants draped in moss. Eli lifted his binoculars more than once, scanning the tree line. "Look, Dad! Deer!" Across the water, 2 of them stood drinking from the shallows, their reflections rippling with each careful movement. Wade nodded, lowering his rifle. "Beautiful, aren't they? The way they move, always listening." They watched the animals vanish into the trees. Later, as they crested a ridge, Eli stopped short and whispered, "Over there!" Wade followed his gaze, downstream, where the river bent toward a gravel bar. A brown bear stood belly deep in the current, massive and deliberate. Its fur glistened with water, and every few seconds it swung a paw and sent silver salmon flying into the air. Eli's breath caught. "That's incredible." Wade smiled. "That's nature, son. Raw and honest." They watched in silence as the bear feasted, then lumbered away into the forest like a living mountain. The day stretched long and golden. The woods felt endless, every direction an ocean of green. They saw eagles circling above, the occasional squirrel darting across the path, but not a single moose. Eli finally spoke what they were both thinking. It's weird, isn't it? Not seeing any? You'd think we'd spot at least one by now. Wade adjusted his pack and glanced at the ground. Maybe they're higher up this time of year. Or maybe the sound of us has them spooked. Or maybe, Eli said with a grin, they heard about you and decided to stay home. Wade chuckled. Could be. They kept walking, but the laughter faded quickly, swallowed by the quiet. The woods grew still again. Not silent exactly, just watchful. Even the wind seemed to slow, as if the forest were holding its breath. They reached a clearing by dusk, where the river widened into a calm mirror of black glass. The firelight from their new camp licked at the trunks of the nearby trees, throwing shifting shadows across the ground. Eli sat by the water with his binoculars, scanning the opposite bank one last time before night fully settled. Still nothing, he muttered. Wade looked up from the fire, his face lit in orange and gold. That's hunting. Half patience, half luck. Eli lowered the binoculars and nodded. Yeah, guess so. The boy turned back to the river, and for a brief second he thought he saw something move in the reflection. Something large and antlered, standing just beyond the tree line. But when he looked up, there was nothing there. He stared a moment longer, then shook it off and went to sit by his father. The forest around them creaked softly in the night air, branches shifting like old bones. The fire popped, sending sparks spinning toward the dark sky. Wade poured another cup of coffee and passed it to Eli. Tomorrow's another day. We'll head deeper in. The moose are out there somewhere. Eli nodded, wrapping his hands around the warm tin. Somewhere far beyond their camp, deep in the dark, the forest gave a single low groan, like wind through a hollow, or something heavier moving between the trees. Neither of them noticed, and the moose, as always, remained unseen. The next morning came gray and soundless. A thin mist clung to the trees, and even the river seemed to move slower, as if time itself had thickened overnight. Wade and Eli ate in silence, the fire hissing faintly under the damp air. When they set out again, there was no breeze, no bird song, only the crunch of their boots and the soft scrape of branches brushing their jackets. By mid-morning, the silence had become its own kind of noise. Eli kept glancing around, his brow furrowed. It's quiet, huh? Yeah, Wade said. He adjusted the strap of his rifle. Weather's changing, that's all. Animals can feel it before we do. Eli nodded, but his shoulders stayed tense. After a while, he said, Feels like they're all hiding. Wade smiled faintly. Maybe they know you're coming. The boy gave a short laugh, but it didn't stick. By noon, the sky had turned the color of pewter. Wade checked his compass twice, then a third time. The needle twitched, but never settled. He frowned, shielding it with his hand, as though the fault might be his own reflection. You okay? Eli asked. Yeah, Wade said quickly. Just making sure we're heading right. He folded the compass back into his pocket and led the way uphill, through thicker brush. Every few yards he paused to mark a tree with his knife, a habit he hadn't needed in years. The forest changed subtly as they climbed. Less undergrowth, more shadows. The trees stood closer together here, their trunks darker, older. Wade began to feel the first real doubt curl in his stomach. He tried to shake it off. He'd spent half his life reading woods like these, and still something about this place felt wrong. He told himself he could find the truck again easily. Just follow the river back downstream. But when he looked over his shoulder, the sound of rushing water was gone. Only stillness. He forced a smile when he caught Eli watching him. Let's go a bit farther. See if we can't find signs of a trail up ahead. Eli hesitated, then nodded. Okay. By late afternoon, the light began to fade early. A chill crept through the trees that didn't feel like weather. Wade decided to make camp sooner than planned, though he didn't say why. They stopped in a narrow clearing ringed by black spruce, the kind of place that seemed to swallow sound. The air smelled of cold sap and earth. Why here? Eli asked quietly. Just till morning, Wade said. We'll head back to the river first thing. They built a small fire, ate a quiet meal of beans and jerky, and spoke little. The woods felt heavier with each passing hour, pressing closer around the circle of firelight. At one point, Eli lifted his head. "Dad, do you hear that?" Wade paused, listening. There was nothing. Not even the crackle of the fire for a moment. Just the long breath of the forest, slow and even. "Hear what?" he asked, gently. Eli shook his head. "I thought, I don't know, like footsteps. Big ones." Wade smiled, keeping his voice calm. "Probably echo from the firewood popping. Sound travels strange out here." Eli nodded but kept staring into the dark between the trees. When the fire began to die, they crawled into their tents. Wade listened to his son's lantern click on through the thin nylon wall. A soft rustle followed, the sound of paper. Eli had brought a small notepad from home. Wade smiled in the dark, picturing him hunched over, writing by lamplight. Inside his tent, Eli whispered as he wrote, "Dear Mom, I miss you so much. I'm having the time of my life. I've seen 12 porcupines, a handful of foxes, and even a bear, but no moose yet. Love, Eli. P.S. Dad fell in the river and it was hilarious." He smiled, folded the paper neatly, and tucked it into his backpack. The lantern light dimmed, then clicked off. Sometime after midnight, Eli stirred. The woods outside had gone unnaturally still again. The air thick enough to hear his own heartbeat. He thought he'd heard something. A shuffle, maybe, or the low groan of a branch bending in the wind. He sat up, listening. Nothing. He decided he just needed to use the bathroom. Slipping on his boots, he unzipped the tent and stepped into the cold night. The moon hung low, pale behind a veil of mist. He took a few steps from camp, the ground soft and cold beneath his feet. He was halfway back when he froze. A noise behind him. Heavy. Rhythmic. Footfalls. "Dad?" he whispered. No answer. He turned toward the sound. Just shadows between the trees. Then something moved. Fast. A blur. A shape too big to make sense of. Eli's breath caught. "Dad!" he screamed. "Dad, help!" Wade woke to the sound of his son's voice, sharp, terrified. His eyes snapped open, disoriented, the world still half a dream. Through the blur of sleep he saw movement, a dark shape dragging Eli backward into the trees, his small lantern swinging wildly. "Eli!" Wade lunged for his rifle, but before he could rise, something slammed into him. A massive weight, hard and unyielding. A hoof. Pain exploded behind his eyes. The world went black. His last thought before darkness took him was the echo of his son's voice, fading into the trees. Wade woke to the smell of cedar, cigar smoke, and blood. His head throbbed. A burlap sack clung to his face, coarse and wet against his skin. He tried to move, but his wrists were bound tight against the arms of a chair. Rope bit into his skin when he struggled. He drew a shaky breath and froze. He wasn't outside. The air was too still, too warm. Somewhere nearby a fire crackled softly. Wade could hear it. The pop of sap in burning wood, the faint hiss of ember. Beneath that came another sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Then a voice, deep, gravelly, and impossible. "He's awake." The sack was yanked from his head. Light stabbed his eyes. Wade blinked hard, breath coming in ragged gasps. The room around him swam into view, and for a long moment his mind refused to make sense of it. He sat in a massive hall built from carved timber and dark stone. The ceilings soared high, supported by beams as thick as tree trunks. Chandeliers of antler and brass hung low, their candles flickering with a golden light. Every inch of the place spoke of wealth. Old wealth, from the polished floors to the carved hunting scenes along the walls. And then the paintings. Wade's eyes locked on them. Framed like trophies, each one showed hunting parties, but reversed. Men on all fours, moose standing tall on hind legs, dressed in fine coats and cloaks, their antlers crowned with medals. One painting showed a moose holding a rifle, another kneeling beside a dead man like a hunter posing with his prize. Wade's pulse quickened. He turned his head and froze. They were here, all around him. Moose standing upright. Massive, towering creatures wrapped in ornate cloaks and tailored vests. Their antlers glinted with polished metal tips, their hooves adorned with gold rings. The air was thick with their scent, musk, smoke, and damp fur. One of them leaned close, the firelight catching its eyes. Dark, intelligent, merciless. Wade's voice broke free in a raw shout. "Where is he? Where's my son? What did you do with Eli?" No answer. He thrashed against the ropes, the chair creaking under his weight. "You sick bastards! You hear me? Where's my boy?" The moose said nothing, only watched him, calm, patient, curious. Wade's breathing slowed, his anger giving way to confusion. His mind raced, trying to bridge the gap between what his eyes saw and what he knew could not be real. The creatures shifted slightly, making room. One of them stepped forward. It was taller than the rest, its fur a dark silvery brown. Around its shoulders draped a cloak lined with crimson and gold. Its antlers were broader, heavier, nearly brushing the chandelier above. When it spoke, its voice rumbled low and deliberate, shaped by a mouth not built for human words. "You are awake," it said. "Good." Wade could only stare, chest heaving. The creature continued. "You are in our hall, human. The hall of the Grand Hunt. You were brought here, because it is your turn." "My what?" Wade whispered. The moose tilted its head. "Your kind have hunted ours for centuries. You call it sport, tradition. We call it murder." It stepped closer, and the firelight caught its eyes again. Ancient, glimmering with cruel amusement. "Here, in our lands, we honor tradition as well. We call it the reversal." Another moose to the side gave a low grunt of laughter, the sound like a drum in Wade's chest. "You will be released," the leader said. "You will run. You will fight. And if—" It paused, savoring the word. "If you survive until the sun sets again, you will be reunited with your son." Wade's heart pounded so loud he could barely hear his own voice. "And if I don't?" The moose's nostrils flared. "Then you will be remembered. In paintings." Laughter rumbled through the hall, low, guttural, chilling. Wade shouted, straining against the ropes until the chair groaned. "You can't do this! You're animals!" The leader's tone darkened. "And you are prey." The ropes were cut with a single swing of a curved blade. Wade stumbled to his feet, his legs trembling. Two of the cloaked moose flanked him immediately, enormous, breathing hard through flared nostrils. One shoved a bundle into his arms, his backpack and a knife. "You have 1 hour," the leader said. "Run." The hall doors swung open with a thunderous echo. Beyond them lay the dark forest, lit by a waning moon. Wade stumbled into the night, his boots hitting the earth hard. The door slammed shut behind him. For a moment, everything was still. Then, somewhere deep in the trees, came a sound, a gentle voice on the wind that seemed to whisper, "Run." The forest swallowed Wade whole. Moonlight dripped through the canopy in silver veins, enough to see by, but not enough to feel safe. His breath came fast, every exhale flashing white in the cold air. He ran until his legs burned, until the lodge was only a nightmare behind him, a place the world could never know. When he finally stopped, the silence pressed in so thick it felt like sound itself had died. He leaned against a tree, clutching the knife they'd given him. His backpack hung heavy on his shoulder. He tore it open. A few rations, a canteen, a coil of rope. No rifle, no compass, no map. They wanted him helpless. He turned in a slow circle, eyes scanning the forest. The trees loomed like pillars, ancient and unbending. Every shape looked like movement. Every shadow felt alive. He thought of Eli, his voice, his laugh, the way he'd written that letter to his mom, the last normal moments of their lives. Then the realization hit him like a stone dropped through his chest. They said he'd be reunited with his son. Eli wasn't safe somewhere inside that lodge. He was out here too. "They're hunting both of us," Wade whispered. "He's out here somewhere. I've got to find him." Somewhere far off, a horn sounded, low, long, terrible. The note rolled through the forest like thunder across an open plain. It vibrated in Wade's chest. The moose were coming. He turned and ran. Branches whipped against his face. Roots grabbed at his boots. The forest blurred into streaks of motion and breath and fear. Behind him, he heard it, faint at first, then building, the pounding of hooves. They were fast, faster than he'd imagined. A sound like trees breaking echoed through the night. Wade glanced over his shoulder and saw shadows moving between the trunks. Enormous, upright figures cutting through the forest with impossible strength. He veered downhill, half running, half falling. A river shimmered below, black and cold. He stumbled into it, gasping at the shock of icy water, and crouched low beneath the current. The hooves grew louder, closer. Wade pressed himself flat against a boulder, barely daring to breathe. The moonlight caught ripples in the water, just enough to show what moved above him. Massive legs, hooves churning mud, antlers brushing the branches as they passed. One of the moose stopped, its breath fogged in the air. It turned its head slowly, sniffing. Wade's fingers tightened on the knife. He could hear his own heartbeat like a drum inside his skull. The moose leaned closer. The smell of musk and smoke filled his lungs. Then, a distant horn sounded again, farther east. The creature froze, snorted, and bolted toward the sound. Wade stayed still for a long time, until the last echo of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Only then did he climb out of the river, shaking uncontrollably, his clothes soaked through and freezing. He sank to his knees and looked up at the trees. Somewhere in the darkness, his son was being hunted. "Hold on, Eli," he whispered. "I'm coming." He forced himself back to his feet, teeth chattering, and started moving north. Each step was slower now, heavier, but there was a strange fire in him, a primal will that refused to die. All around him the forest breathed, branches shifted, water dripped. A distant owl called once, then went silent. And though the sound was faint, carried on the wind like a whisper from the dark, Wade could swear he heard it again, a voice low and cold echoing through the pines. "Run." The morning sunrise bled through the trees like a wound reopening. Wade moved through the forest in a half-delirious haze. His body was a map of bruises and cuts, his lungs raw from cold air and panic. Every muscle screamed with exhaustion, but he kept running, always running, through rivers, across jagged ridges, down muddy slopes that tore his hands open. The horns had sounded all day and night, echoing across the valleys like thunder, driving him wherever they wanted him to go. The moose were tireless, clever, organized. They hunted not with speed, but with patience. By late afternoon the forest dimmed again. The light turned amber, then gold. He could feel the end approaching, though he didn't know if it meant salvation or death. He stumbled through a ravine slick with moss and mud, clutching his knife, though his fingers could barely hold it. His vision tunneled. Everything looked blurred around the edges. That's when he heard them. Hooves. Dozens of them, pounding the earth, drawing closer with every second. He turned, panting, just in time to see them break through the trees, towering silhouettes, antlers glinting in the fading light. Wade tried to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. One of the moose lowered its head and charged. The sound was like a cannon blast. It struck him square in the ribs, the antlers lifting him clean off the ground and hurling him through the air. He crashed down into a ravine, rolling through mud and roots until he landed hard in the shallows of a river below. Everything went white for a moment. When he came to, he was half submerged in freezing water, blood trickling from his forehead. The world rang like a bell. Through the blur he saw them, dark shapes at the edge of the ravine. The moose circled above, their breath steaming in the last light of day. The one that had struck him climbed down into the ravine, water splashing around its hooves. It rose up on its hind legs, towering, its chest heaving. Wade blinked through the blood in his eyes as the creature reared higher, hooves poised to crush his skull. Then, a horn. Long, low, endless. The sound rolled through the valley, ancient and final. The moose froze. The leader's voice carried from the ridge. "The sun has set." The attacker bared its teeth, breath snorting through flared nostrils. "He's finished," it growled. "One strike. No one will know." A second voice cut through the air, firm, commanding. "Absolutely not. That is not the spirit of the hunt. The sun has set. The prey has survived." The moose on the riverbank glared down at Wade, eyes black with fury. Then slowly it stepped back. Wade coughed, spitting mud and blood. He tried to speak, his voice little more than rasp. "Eli," he gasped. "Where is my son? Take me to Eli." The leader's voice echoed again from above. "You will be reunited, as promised." Two moose descended the slope, lifted Wade to his feet, and half carried him through the mud. He didn't fight. He couldn't. He looked up once as they dragged him from the ravine. The sun had dipped behind the ridge, painting the sky in crimson streaks. The forest had gone utterly still. He didn't know if it was relief or dread that filled his chest, only that the hunt was over, and he was going back. The lodge loomed out of the darkness like a monument carved from nightmare. Wade stumbled through its doors, half dragged by his escorts. His boots left muddy streaks across the polished stone floor. The grand hall looked just as it had before, towering ceilings, chandeliers of antlers and brass, the crackle of a massive hearth at its center. But something had changed. The laughter was gone. Only silence greeted him now, thick and reverent as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The moose led him down the length of the hall, past the flickering candles, past the paintings that now seemed to mock him with every brush stroke. He saw the reversal scenes again, moose hunters posing beside fallen men, their glassy eyes staring out of gilded frames. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. "Where is he?" Wade rasped. "Where's Eli?" No one answered. At the far end of the hall, the double doors waited, massive, black, carved with hunts so intricate they seemed to move in the firelight. Wade remembered passing them before, the doors he hadn't been allowed to open. Now they swung inward on their own, releasing a breath of warm, smoky air that carried the faint metallic scent of blood and varnish. The leader stepped forward. "Come," he said. "Be reunited, as I promised." Two moose took Wade by the arms and guided him inside. The trophy room was larger than he expected, and quieter than he could bear. Dozens of mounted heads lined the walls, bears, wolves, men. Each plaque bore inscriptions in curling letters Wade couldn't read. Firelight licked across polished wood and glass eyes, filling the room with soft, flickering horror. At the center stood the great fireplace, its mantel carved from dark oak, its flames roaring gold and red. The leader stopped in front of it. The other moose moved aside, parting like a curtain. And there he was, Eli, mounted cleanly, perfectly above the fire. His face was pale, almost peaceful, eyes replaced with glass that caught the light and made them shine. His hair was neatly combed. Around his neck hung a small wooden tag etched with his initials, E.H. For a long time, Wade didn't move. His mind simply refused to connect what he was seeing with what he knew. Then it hit him. The air left his lungs in one violent, choking sob. His knees buckled. He fell to the floor, hands sinking into the cold stone. A sound tore out of him, deep, ragged, primal. A sound that didn't belong to language or even grief, but to something older, something animal. He crawled forward on shaking arms until he was directly beneath the mantel. His fingertips brushed the edge of the hearth. "No, no, please, oh God!" The moose said nothing. The fire popped softly, throwing amber light across Wade's blood-streaked face. One of the creatures stepped closer and dropped something onto the floor beside him. "This was found among your son's belongings." It was a torn piece of paper, half soaked, half burned. Wade blinked through tears and read what remained, his voice barely a whisper. "Dear Mom, I miss you so much. I'm having the time of my life." Wade pressed the paper to his chest, His entire body trembled. His cries filled the hall, raw, echoing, endless. Finally, one of the moose spoke, its tone strangely respectful. "He was a fighter," it said. "He injured one of our brethren significantly by dropping a rock upon his head." The words hung in the air like smoke. Wade didn't look up. He couldn't. He just stayed there, kneeling, shaking, weeping, as the leader turned away, signaling the others toward the doors. "Take him," the leader said quietly. "Release him to the forest." Wade didn't hear, or maybe he did. His world had narrowed to firelight and the soft hiss of burning logs. His boy's voice echoed in his mind, that last letter repeating on a loop until it lost all meaning. "Dear Mom, I miss you so much. I'm having the time of my life." The moose began to leave, their hooves thudding softly against the floor. The doors closed behind them with a heavy, final click. Wade stayed where he was, his face turned toward the flames, his body racked with silent sobs. Outside, the wind swept across the valley, moving through the pines, whispering a single word that seemed to echo through every hollow of the forest. Run. Weeks passed. Wade Harlan wandered the wilderness barefoot and broken, a ghost in flannel and torn denim. When forest rangers finally found him, he was gaunt, frostbitten, and muttering words over and over again. Lodge. Moose. Hunt. Back in Elk River, Wade and his son were presumed dead. Laura held a service with an empty casket and never spoke his name again. Wade never returned home. He couldn't face what was left of his life, or what he'd left behind in those woods. That winter they found him frozen in an alley behind a logging yard, eyes wide open to the falling snow. No one knows what he saw in his final moments. But some say, on still nights, when the wind moves through the cedars and the world goes quiet, you can hear the faint sound of a hunting horn drifting through the cold. A reminder that sometimes the moose hunt.
Under the amber, the full moon glows, the frost on the pine, where the cold wind blows. Father and son, with rifles in hand, stepped into shadows through the trembling land. The moose call low, a sound so deep, the forest whispers secrets it swore to keep. Where did you go, my boy, my boy? The woods swallow your laugh, your joy. Taken by the beast with antlers wide, now the hunters run, nowhere to hide. The hooves beat loud on the hollow ground, antlers like branches twisting around. I saw his coat torn at the seam, or was it a phantom, a fevered dream? The leaves fell red like the blood of kin, a price to pay for the hunt of sin. Did you hear the crack, the bough that broke? Did you feel the weight of the curse they spoke? Where did you go, my boy, my boy? The wood swallowed your laugh, your joy, taken by the beast with antlers wide. Now the hunters run, nowhere to hide. They're not the prey, they're the ones who see, with eyes like coals and silence that speaks. They're gathering now, and they've tasted blood. The forest turns tide, the hunters are judged.